Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon from wherever you are joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here and learn about our latest topic, which is CSI or Cloud Suite Industrial SyteLine Tips and Tricks. Today's presenters will be Paul Dubuque and Tim McManus. And with that, let's get into a little bit of housekeeping. We do have all of the lines muted, so please use the Q&A if you have any questions. And if you would like to reach out to us outside of the presentation, you're always welcome to send an email to info@aitbusiness.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you right away. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording itself will be made available in our Lunch and Learn section of our website after the presentation. And I think that should about cover it. So with that, I'd like to welcome Paul and Tim to begin the presentation.
Very good. Well, thank you very much and welcome everybody. I am in PowerPoint for the moment. I am going to jump out of PowerPoint. We're going to try something different today. So as a tip and trick, our first one will be not using PowerPoint. So what we are going to use is we're going to use one of the landing pages that comes along with CSI when you do it on the web. So it's using our Infor document management, loaded up the slides. So we'll see how this goes. I've never actually presented slides through this. So this is an adventure for all of us on a Tuesday afternoon or morning as it may be.
Good thing this isn't a demo, huh, Paul?
Yeah, that's right. Good thing. It's always good to do this. And I threw this one at Tim like 5 minutes ago. I'm like, I'm doing it this way. We're going to try it. So here we go. So we're gonna go through these slides. So Tim in the team here at AIT said, it'd be a great idea if we could go through and do some tips and tricks. We've got users that have been using the product since it was Front Step, SyteLine, all the other names that it may have gone through. And then we've got users that may be brand new. And then we have users that came along somewhere along the way. And what you learned, how you learned to do something was whoever taught you how to do it. And you may not have known all the other ways to get there. So some of what you see today, you're going to say, yeah, I already knew that. But we're hoping that we find some of those key pieces in here as we go through this and say, I didn't know I could do that. I'm going to try that. And if that does that, let me try this. So I'm hoping this spurs a bit of conversation. Give us some feedback. You found something in here that worked well. You found something that works even better. Let us know that. We'll share that with the group. So keep that going. I'm back with the propeller heads on my technical warning. So anytime I see stuff that may be technical, we'll give you a beanie count of how many propeller heads this may be. Most of this is going to be, you could go hatless today. Other times you're going to see that you might need one or two beanies to cover it. But not to fear, most of the tips and tricks actually come out of no hat wearing at all. So that's just my humorous way. And I feel very safe saying propeller heads because I used to be a programmer back in my former days using very, very high-tech COBOL. So use that. So today we're going to go through, our agenda is going to be looking at some navigation. How do we move around in the system? There's more than one way to do it. And many of you may have found one way that works for you, and you may find that there's different ways that work better at different points. We'll go through some of that. How do you find your information? So where do we go in the system? What's the best tools to do that? Some grid management. I'm going to guess that just about everybody that's used CSI or SyteLine has done some grid manipulation, but let's go through a few of those mechanics anyway, because there's probably something in there that you may not have seen or didn't know you could do. So we'll go through that. We'll talk about how we do some communication between a couple of applications. We'll talk about life cycles, and this has nothing to do with physical exercise, so you're safe sitting at your desk watching this right from home, but we'll go show where that helps you out. And then we're going to go talk about a couple of ways to sequence things, and you can uniquely sequence things inside the system. So with that, we're going to do some navigation. And we're going to start with the Explorer. So many of you have seen the Explorer. Most of us turn it on and off and push it off to the side. But there's some nice little nuggets of information that show up in the Explorer that we've uncovered. So we'll go through that. We'll look at some My Folders and a couple other things. So I am in one of our home pages. So you'll see me scrolling up and down. I don't have a big screen. I'm on a laptop, so I don't have a big screen. But I have the document down here. Up top, I have all the navigation that I want to do. So when I look at navigation, I'm going to look at Explorer. I'm going to click on one of the menu options in here, and it's going to bring me right to SyteLine. So we're in here, pretty straightforward. Well, the Explorer that I'm talking about, right here, I'm going to open it up, and you'll see as I open this up, it brings a little black bar off to the side, but you have a number of different ways that you can navigate. So you can come through and say, well, tell me all the forms that are out here. And there's a long list. So there's a lot of forms that we're going to go through. We're not going to go through each of those forms. So I'm going to shrink that back down here in just a moment. Once I scroll far enough up to the top, we'll shrink that back down. You can do this by module, which is probably more applicable. I want to do something that deals with a customer, and maybe it has to do with something in customer service, homepage, and we'll talk about home pages. Or maybe it has something to do with order entry. So you can drill right to where you want to go and use those applications. So it's another way to navigate through the menu system. There's also options in here to say, what are some of the optional modules, or what are the roles that you have? I'm also going to talk about something called My Folders. So these are some of the things I have in here. So some of the things that you'll see are something called auto run and preload. So those are the two that show up by default. So I've added a couple of other options under my screen that you won't see unless you've added exactly the same thing. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what auto run does. So I've seen these features. So I was kind of new to CSI a few months back, and what is auto run and what is preload? What do they do for me? Why would I want to do that when I just open the form? That just seems silly to have those. Well, it's not. It makes great sense. Auto run says I can load these forms in here. Maybe I am a user that uses items, purchase receipts, and quality every day, and it's all I use. That's the 3 screens I use for 90% of my work. Well, I can have it automatically load those and open them up every time I start CSI. Great. I don't have to go fumbling for them, looking for them, searching for them. They're right there where I need them. Well, then what's preload? What does that do for me? Well, maybe I use those 3 screens, but there's 2 or 3 other screens or forms that I use besides that. I don't use them all the time, but when I use them, I want to get there quick. So preload says, load that into the memory of the computer, but don't actually open up the form yet. So you can come in here and you can right click on one of these. You can add a new shortcut. You'll browse to what you want to add. It'll load it in here. And if you log in and out, you'll see it opens up those screens where it preloads them. And you'll notice those forms load much quicker if they're already under preload. So it's a nice way to build a little speed of using the system. I also use something called My Folders. So under My Folders, you can create something called either folders or add applications in here or shortcuts. So I've got a couple that I've done in here. So I've added some shortcuts, but we're going to add a shortcut just to show you what that does. And the real handy part about this is you can put the applications that you use in here and load them up under your folders. A great use for this is maybe you have weekly reports, maybe you have monthly reports that you use. You can group these different reports or functions by different categories that you define, and you can call them up, and you can put your own little menu structure in here so that you don't have to look through those hundreds of forms that we were looking at before. They can just be the dozen or so that you use as a user. So I'm going to add one in here. In this case, we're going to go through and we're going to add, well, I don't know, let's look at customer orders. If I can spell, I'll be all set today. You'll get to witness me spelling very poorly. It's a great thing to do. All right. So customer orders. So we can say, yep, that's what we want. It loads it in here. As you probably see, I have it in there twice because I already had it on there before. So I believe this is the latest one, and I'm going to right click on it and look at the properties to it. Yep, that's the latest one. You'll notice in here, it tells you what it is. Well, if you were brand new and didn't know what this meant, this is where I enter orders. Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. That title sounds nice, but you can put up your own tooltips in here. All right, maybe not super useful yet, but you can click on this. I'll double click it and it'll open up the actual form that we're looking for in here. And that's great. All right, so we've got that in here. Maybe I want to add a different one in here. So I'm going to add something, I'm going to add a new shortcut, items. So how about items in here? Items is something that everybody uses. We like items, here we go. We add items, we see that in here. I've got a couple that I've already played with a little bit, and I'm going to probably copy what I did earlier. I'm going to click on items, and yeah, sure enough, it opened up items, exactly what I wanted. But now I'm going to do something a little bit different in here. I'm going to say, well, let's right click on that. Let's look at the properties. And yeah, I can put a description in here, and let's look at the find the parts that begin with FA. All right, well, that sounds pretty good. Well, how would I do that? Well, there's a parameters field in here that lets you filter on this, and it lets you pre-filter so that, you know, we're going to talk about filter in place in a moment, but this pre-filters just as it opens up the form, and as a way to go ahead and do that. So I've already got that typed into a little form over here, and I'm going to just copy and paste it in just so we have that. I'll show you what that is in just a moment. It's in the PowerPoint deck. Just paste it, and I'll show you where I got it as well, which is even more important. So it's this gobbledygook. It looks like lots of letters are typed in here. There's a filter, and you'll see the FA is listed right there. We'll say, okay, well, that's good. I've typed that in. I'm going to now double click it. It's going to open up the window, and now it's filtered those parts just that begin with FA, just as I wanted to. Now I could have done the filter in place, which we'll talk about, but this is a great use of saying, all right, I want to find just certain data that's sitting out there. So I've created a couple of other ones in here. So I've got one that I've created, and I'm just going to open it up just so you see it, so you don't have to watch me typing. And this one's filtering on parts that have a planner code of MV and a wildcard. So the %sign is a wildcard in here in these filters. So this is telling me what to do in here. And I'm going to say, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Well, let me open that up. Now I've got all those, and if I click over to the planning tab, you'll see all of these have that MV in there. So no matter which item I select, it's going to have that MV as part of the planner code. A great use case for this. You're responsible for these particular products. Here's what you're going to do. Here's the parts that I want to see. I don't want to have to query that or filter on that every single time. Maybe I've got certain parts that have a certain product code or a commodity code, and I want to go look for those every time. And it's something I do often. So I'm going to create filters in here that are already preset, and they're right off my menu, and I can go ahead and do that. Saves you a bunch of time of doing that filter in place, finding the field, make sure you typed it right every single time.
Hey, Paul, question here on this. So if I do a filter unfilter right now, I'm going to lose that that selection at this point, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And so, you know, on the 3 beanie sort of thing, you actually can set these forms up to have those filters that are permanently in the form. So when I filter and unfilter, it'll come back, but that's a little bit more into the Mongoose tool set. But if anyone wanted to do that, you can, and we can take that offline.
Yeah, that's a great point, because what Tim's talking about is maybe I only should be working in this planner code, and that's the only one company-wide. That's the rule. I can't touch any other parts. And even though I've got curious eyes and fingers and I want to go look at those, we can set CSI up to say, no, Paul, you're only going to look at these for you. So there are some ways to do that, a little bit beyond the tips and tricks of today, but very important for certain applications. So a couple of other places that I looked at where these could fit. So I created a little folder called These Are Mine. So maybe I want to look at all the customer orders that are for a particular salesman. Oh, look at that. It's my initials in there. That's pretty good. Get that going. So this is going to come up, and you'll notice that the salesperson on all these is PGD, sure enough. All right, well, what about all the customers that are B? And you'll notice it opens separate forms each time I do this filter. So I can have both of these open at the same time. So maybe I've got somebody that interrupted me partway through my day and said, hey, got to go look for this. Great, I can jump over and open that up as well. But what you can also do is combine them. So in this case, I want to look at customers that begin with B and have salesman PGD. All right, so let's do that. So this should be a subset of those two lists that match. Let's do a little thinking. It's going to filter that down. And did I not filter? No, I got it right. There we go. So we've got all those. Oh, my internet says it's a little fuzzy, so I apologize if my voice is crackling a little bit. But what we have here is you'll see the parts. You'll see, see the customers that begin with B. All of them have PGD as the salesperson. I bring this up here in sales because it can apply to purchasing. It can apply to other areas. Maybe you're a sales manager and you've got a couple of different salespeople that you want to look at and look at what activity they have. So you can look at all of the sales orders that are open or that were created on a certain day or period by a particular salesperson. It gives you a great way to call them up and say, hey, here's the 6 orders that you took this week. Let's talk about them. Here's what we should do different or whatever. Same thing on purchasing. So you can create these filters that really help you focus on what you want to do without having to keep typing and typing and typing. They're already stored in here. You see me click them and they're gone. All right. Do we have any questions so far in the chat? So
no, nothing's come up just yet. But again, if anybody has any questions along the way, please feel free to use the Q&A.
Very good. All right. So I'm going to show you one other. I'm going to close Explorer for the second. So it's just a matter of clicking on there and closing it. I also am going to show you another tip or trick that wasn't in my slide deck, and that is a close all. So sometimes I open way too many forms that I just don't want to know which one I have open now. I just want them all closed. So window, close all, close them all down. It works really nice. The only caveat there is if you've changed some of the grid layouts, it will ask you, do you want to save these? So just be prepared to answer a couple of questions when you do that. And we'll look at grids in just a moment. Jump back out, take a look. What else do we need to cover? We talked about my folders. We're going to talk about opening things. So Control O. I'm going to bet most people here know about that, but we're going to talk about Control O. And we'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go right back into CSI. Under Forms, there's an Open, but you can also do a Control O. One bit of caution in there, and Tim and I have worked on a few presentations together. He's a little old school with this, where he is always hitting Control O or Control N, and there's a couple of other control codes that work a little bit differently between the click once and the web. With the web, it's very picky. If you are not focused on an actual field or actual form of CSI and you do the Control O, it goes out and whatever other tab you may be on or window you may be on, it's going to go do something else. So just a word of caution. If you're going to use the Control O, go ahead and just make sure you're focused on CSI at that time.
And the short of it, if you're using the click once or the smart client, all those hotkeys work just fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I am in the web client today. I could jump over to the click once, but then I wouldn't have my cool PowerPoint slide deck inside my Mingle pages. Well, I just wanted to show everybody how cool that was. Let's see. So I'm in here with the Control O. You can filter on what you want to look for in here. So most of you have seen this, but you can type. You saw me type items earlier. And you can type on the caption or you can type on the name. So if you knew the specific title of what you're looking for, it's going to look for that particular title. So and usually there's no spaces or, a little bit more computer language as opposed to human readable language. So depending on how specific you want to get, you can filter on either of those. You can use wildcards in here. There's case sensitive. So if you're really specific on there, you can get even more. So the Control O is probably one of the more common tools to open different forms. I like using the Explorer or one of the other options in here. So one of the ones, I'm going to cancel out of here. I'm going to go right back to my Mingle pages. I love using my little pages up here because I don't have to type anything. I don't have to remember what the name of the form is once I've added it. So I've got in this case, I've got a buyer home page. Another great way to navigate through the system. You can go through and you'll see, in this case, I'm in with the buyer, but there's many other home pages for different roles or disciplines. And then here, all the things that you'd want to do as whatever role you're in. So in this case, items, vendors, vendor interactions, some QC activities, POs and requisitions, other activities. There's some metrics that show up in here. There's some navigator features that pop up. They let you see some of the data that's in here. And I think we've talked about some of these home pages before, but they're a great place to kind of focus yourself if you do buyer activity or you do maybe you're a planner, maybe you're a controller. There's different home pages for each of those, and you can have multiple home pages up there. And maybe in a future one of these, we'll show you how to combine a couple of those where you can maybe get a little bit of what the buyer does and a little bit of what the planner does all in one place. But it's a great way to focus on the activity that's important to someone that's doing buying activity. All right. When I come back out and I keep selecting, you'll see the icon. It's the AIT icon, and we just added it in here. I'm in the home pages or the landing pages. I'm sorry. So we do have a distinction here between the Mingle landing pages and the CSI home pages. I know it sounds like a mouthful. If I was going to use just the CSI home pages that we were just in, that's very role specific. And it has a lot of things that are built in, and it's an actual CSI form. If I'm using the Mingle landing page, this kind of sits on top of the ERP and lets me jump to specific spots inside the ERP, and I can open specific records. So as I look in here, we haven't gotten to the search part yet, but this is a perfect place to talk about it. I can filter specific items in here. I wanted to open that one particular part, and I can do the other filters in here to look at all of them that have the same type of planner code or title to the part ID. But this case, I opened up this specific one. It's very nice to filter to that particular one. Where would you want to use this, and why would you want to look at just one part? Well, if you have a critical part, a big project that's come on online, you can filter and focus right to that one part, one customer order, one big purchase order. You're waiting for it to hit the dock. You can focus on that, put it on here. It's something you're going to check 3 or 4 times a day. Well, I don't have to do any searching. I just click that, and it's going to tell me what's up with that particular part, that particular order, whatever I'm looking for. So it's a great way to get into the specifics. Here's where we're going to get into a little bit more of some fancy stuff. So we're going to put on our beanie hat just a little bit. So our next slide shows a little bit of those parameters. So I mentioned before when I was in the Explorer, how did I get there? So how did I have it filter on it? So we've got it written out in our PowerPoint, and it's this. It looks garbly-gook, but it's set some variables, tell it to refresh the screen. But by the way, filter the item on something that begins with FA and the percent is the wildcard, or filter on the planner code. And this is just telling me what I want to filter on, and this tells me what kind of field I want to filter on. I didn't just come up with this on my own. If you are impatient, don't want to wait for our PowerPoint to get sent out, or can't wait to start trying this, just do a help. Go up there to help, type Object Explorer Properties. It'll give you the sequence of this. I think the one they have in there is test %sign, but it's a great way to get that information. And by the way, help is another one of those tips and tricks that you want to take advantage of. Over the years, more and more data has been added, more and more information has been added to the help files. So it's becoming actual helpful. It used to be the same kinds of things that you'd see in help all the time that weren't always specific. Now it's very, very clear and very precise, and some good examples in there in many cases, like we saw with the Explorer. Now, when I went over and did the Mingle landing page, so I was up here and I did that one that said filtered on here. I had that filtered on something, and it's a little bit longer. So it's, I'm sorry, that's the next page we're going to go over to. Sorry, that's a little bit longer. This one is definitely, I'm going to say, because it has more, it has actual hexadecimal, so I'm not to scare anyone there. This one's going to be a 2 or 3 beanie hat wearing to do. But once you see what it really does, it's really, really easy. So the way I added these is I can come in here and I can add another one of those. I can add a link in here, and it's just a matter of I'll right click on it and I'll edit it. It tells me that I'm adding something from a bookmark. I can put the URL in here, so it actually has a web page or a web direction of where I want to go and look, and it does look like gobbledygook, and you'll notice the refresh is after the after the filter in this case, so it's a little bit backwards from the one that we did in Explorer, but this is where you can go ahead and set those. The record looks a little bit different. So in this case, unfiltered, it gives this weird question mark, favorite content, items, and logical ID, blah, 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 and it tells it the URL. To add the filter, so we're adding some parentheses in here, filter, we're telling it we're going to filter on an item. There's a percent and some codes, and those that are really interested, the 38 I think is an equal, a 3D, I'm sorry, is an equal sign in hex. The %27 is a single quote, but this is what I wanted to filter on. So that MVCCS-01, that's what I wanted to filter on. So a couple of times I've gone through and edited these, and I've either squashed the 27 or squashed the other percent. Got to be careful. It's very, very picky. So what I've done is I've created a little file off to the side, and it's literally a notebook file on my desktop that I start storing these in, and I can copy and paste. So if I add one of these, it makes it real easy to load them in. So I've got that filter here. You'll see it's pointing, you're going to put it right between the items. So whatever form name and the ampersand in here, that little and sign. So you'll see it in the yellow down here. It's real tiny, I know, on the screen. But when we send you the PowerPoint, you'll be able to, copy that in. And literally, it's a matter of copying that text and starting to play with what else do you want to filter on. So if I'm opening up the item form, maybe I want to filter on that planner code, or I want to filter on something else, something out of stock, or stock is at equals 0, something along those lines. What do I want to filter on? So this is what you can use to get the records that you want. I have that set up in a number of cases in here, so you'll see me using that a lot. It's very, very helpful. Gets you to right to what you want to look for. Okay, so apologize for the extra beanie hat topics on there, but I think it does help for many of the customers. So let's go through and do some filtering. We'll move right along. So
one thing, Paul, real quick, just for what it's worth, I got to forego one beanie on this because I just cut and paste these things, and I actually have built just this whole kind of text file of all these different things, cut and paste. So I don't actually have to pay attention too much to the little ampersand thingies. And if anyone is interested in that, I would be happy to kind of send that text file. It's got a lot of the navigation in there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because some of the forms that you go to, the field that you want to filter on may have a different spelling than what you expect. So it might have a nice pretty name on the screen, but it's shortened or concatenated or something for computer use. So
yeah, and we actually got another question about this, which is actually a really, really good point. If you go back to your prior thing with the hexy whatever, so somebody asked, is it caps sensitive? And they probably asked that because they've known that largely things aren't, but every once in a while in Mongoose and some other areas it is. But this is like where he's got item, filter item, blah, 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 that item, capital I, TEM, that actually, and what that's looking at is the IDO property. And that IDO property, it is cap sensitive. And what I found, there's a couple of modules out here that are like, I think with the service, field service and quality, they've kind of got built, they were built by partners or whatever, but there's a couple things in there like the, I don't know, the SRO num or the item and the QC item thing, they're lowercase. The IDO is actually lowercase. And if you pass that, it drove me nuts, like an hour. I'm trying to figure out what it was. So yes, that is case sensitive. I'm not sure whether it is in the
actual field you're filtering. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've not tried that.
Well, no, the field is not itself.
It's not, okay.
So that could be lowercase MV, but in the Explorer one that you're doing inside, I'm not sure whether the IDO property is case sensitive, but when in doubt, probably I always just try to
keep it. I try to match it. Yeah, that's
good question.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. Right. All right, I'm going to move on to search. Keep the great questions coming. We're going to talk about filter in place, query, data view, and data search in here. So let's come up and we've got some search options. So you saw me filter on here. I'm going to actually open this up unfiltered. And we've got this, we've got it unfiltered. You see all, what we have in here. Actually, I'm gonna go back and say, no. Let's start this from a customer order, because I think that's even more helpful than just looking at items. And again, a good point to make there is I am doing this in just a couple of these forms, but it works for just about all the forms support the functions we're talking about here. So if I want to do a filter in place here, maybe I want to look at all the sales orders. So we did this in my Explorer, all the sales orders, and I can hit the drop down and find my initials in here. And I can say, go ahead and filter in place. Yep, that's great. I can look at the amounts and say, all right, that was good. I got a list. The total price on here. Now I want to open that back up so you can continue to filter in place. So it remembers the PGD. But I'm going to say, what if it is greater than, and I'm going to use the greater than sign. I know I never thought I'd have to use that once I left high school, but sure enough, here it is. Greater than 75,000. So let's see what we get in here. Yep, all right, it's going to go out. Well, there's two orders, so it's a nice way to keep filtering this down. I show this because there's a lot of times I'm looking for something in the system, and I know a little bit of information, and it trimmed my list a bit, but now I still want to trim it a little bit more, and I'll find something in there to help trim it out. And you can keep adding more fields that you want to help filter this down to get exactly what you're looking for. So it's a nice way to get down to this list. There are other things you can do with dates that you can say it must equal this. You can also filter this on other things. It can be greater than, or it could be equal to. One of the challenges that I found is that you can't filter one of the fields for two different variables. I know that sounds odd. So maybe I want to find something that's either between a certain value, maybe orders that are below 75,000 and over 20,000 for whatever reason. I also look at things like, I want to look at this for the outliers. I want to look at either the really big orders that are coming in or the really $0 orders that somebody forgot to put something in, and I want to keep track of those. So how do you track both of those with a filter in place? Well, the answer is you really can't very easily. So what we'll do is we're going to right click on here. We're going to go to filter and we're going to go to query. So there's a query tool that's available in here. And if I look at the query tool, it knows it's linked because I came in here from the customer orders, and I'm going to say, all right, the property I want to look at, and I was talking about what that total price. So here's where it's using some of the different names. I think the other one had the price in it. There's another form that's going to call it the estimated price. So just be a little careful of what field you're looking for. So total price in here. And I think I said greater than, and maybe I just want to look at big orders, not just for ones for PGD, but I want to look at all the big orders in here. And for me, big orders are $400,000 or better. So we're going to look at that. A couple of things to keep in mind as you're typing this in. There's a property that you want to look at. There's some operators. You saw there was an equal sign, a less than, whatever. I'm going to also add this to my list. So you'll notice it puts an and in here in the price. So whatever you're filtering on, and the price is greater than $400,000. And I can say, well, I don't want to go back to the form yet. I want to see, what do I get? Well, I've got a handful of them on here. I can hit search from here. And if I hit search, it's going to send that list back to the customer orders that I was in or whatever form I started this from. I can go ahead and look at this and say, well, I was looking for those big ones and for all the ones that were $0 value. So I'm going to say, what if this is also equal to 0 at the same time? And I want it to be an or, not an and. And now we're going to be I'll say a one beanie hat on this. There's a difference of an and an or in a computer world of how it looks at different arguments. So an or says it can be either one of these, and that's good, and it qualifies. And it has to meet both of these. I want it to be either one. So it either has to be over 400,000 or the price has to be 0. Well, it's an odd thing, but I'm looking for the big deals and the small ones. Those are the ones I'm going to focus on. Refresh. it comes back and it says, there's your list of those. So now I have a couple of choices that I can make here. I can save this. So if this is something I want to do on a daily basis or weekly basis, I can save it, give it a name. I did that earlier today when I was going through this. And give it a name. It just asks you for what name do you want to call it. You type the name in and you move on. I'm going to say go ahead and search. It should send that same list back to this screen. It's going to refresh. So you'll see every order in here is either over 400,000 or is 0. So that's pretty good. I've got my list of things that I want to deal with. So maybe every day I come in and I deal with either the really big orders and all the ones that went out at 0. Who took those? And I need to go fix them, find out what went wrong. So it's a great case to keep doing any of that with. Any questions on that?
Not coming in.
Not yet. All right. And I mentioned that I did save one of those. So if I right click, and I am right clicking, which I will also tell you is another nice tip, you can right click on the screen. You can apply a saved filter. So I've got a couple of saved filters in here and I've given them these need attention. It's going to be the same filter that I have in here, but you can pick one of those and it'll do that. It'll apply that same filter over and over again. So it's a nice way to say, all right, I don't have to stick it in Explorer. I can actually save it and do it as I get into the screen. So whatever works best for you. All right. So I'm just looking at the clock and I'm going to keep on moving here if there's no questions. There are a couple of places that we look at for data and how do we deal with that data? So up top, you'll see that there's something called a data view. There's also something called a data search. So I'm going to hit the data view first. And data view was covered, I believe, in December, maybe November. We did a great webinar on this, a lot more detail than I'm going to cover here. I'm just going to barely touch it. But just know that these fields, this data is available for you right from these screens. So I already filtered this information in here because whatever screen I was on, whatever form I was on, if I hit data view, it takes that set of data that was in the grid and it passed it off to the data view. So typically if I'm going to do this, I'm going to clear that out because maybe I want to filter on all my orders for this week or this month or whatever category it is. And then I get that information. But I can take this and I can group this. It may only be just a couple of customers in here, but now you can start grouping these by different categories. You can also come through, and I'm going to scroll over just a little bit. I don't have my columns all set nice and pretty in here, which I should do, but there's an estimated total price. So it does have a different name in here than it does in some of the others. You can click on that. It pops up another little filter so you can choose the columns you want. So you can get rid of the columns that you don't like or don't need to see. And then you can also do advanced searches in here. So maybe you want to do that same search in here. And I want to look on this as the total price that equals, or is greater than $400,000 in my world. And it's also equals 0 and I can put an or in here, can have any of those values. So the add in this case, it just adds another argument to this. The all or any say all of these have to be met, exact, or any of these have to be met to fall into this. So if I was going to do that same argument in here, I could say anything with a total price greater than 400,000. And I want to also add another line in here with a total price that equals 0, and I would select any, and it would give me that same list of data that we had before. So we can go ahead and do that. If you want more details, encourage you to go back and watch the much more detailed presentation on data views. The goal here was really more to show you that you have quick access to that from sales orders. So, and I did that right from a button up top here.
And one thing, just sorry, Paul, about this, I use this all the time when I'm, with a customer and trying to do some analysis. You can do this from, journal entries or general ledger type things. Like you get that smaller filter, but like we said, if I wanted to in here, my regular SyteLine filter, go that total price. I can't go, over 2 million and under 3 million in here. But what I can do is once that goes to a data view, then I can do all kinds of different, multiple queries and things like that on it. So it's a super thing. It's basically kind of my little data view on demand. Any form that has collections here, and whatever's in that collection, if you need to get more records, blah, 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 just hit that and it goes to data views. It's probably the number one tool I use when I'm actually trying to kind of do analysis and think of things.
Perfect. Great. So we've added that to our toolbar here. So there's in the slide deck, I'm going to show you where you do that in the click once. It's a little bit easier there. If you want to do it in the web, you still can. It just takes a little bit more gymnastics and a few more beanie hats that you have to wear to do that. You have to open up the designer to get to the toolbar editor. So it's not something for the faint of heart. It's not something I would expect every user to go out there and do, but someone from IT can help set that up and push that out to the users as it's appropriate. So I think it is a very helpful tool. And right next to that, there is something called the data search. So we can go to the data search from here, but I can also, I added it out here, so I have my own data search. And data search, to me, when I look at it, it's kind of like the CSI's version of Google. I want to search for something, and I think I was trying this one earlier, and it was plate. And I want to see that in any of those words, in all these sources. So you can pick what source, but I'm going to say go ahead and search. It's going to take a minute. It's going to find it in a couple of different places. And it will take a moment. There's another place that I'm going to take you in just a minute to help filter this list a little bit finer. But here it's found 87 occurrences of it in items. It's found 77 in operations, and some in purchase orders, some in job orders. So it exists in a number of different places, and you can expand this and open this up, and there's a whole list of places that you can go from here to drill into that. So you can open up any of these items. You can get to it from here. But another thing you can do is maybe you only wanted to see the ones that were in items, or only the ones that were in job orders, or whatever you wanted to see. You can filter just on that, and it'll go out there and refilter. It only found the 2 that were in job orders. So this is taking what's set up as the default sets of data that are in here. So we're going to jump over to maybe I'm going to call it a beanie hat and a half, if you will, because we're going to use words like IDO. There's a data search source setup, and again, not something I would expect every user to jump out and do, but maybe some of the IT folks want to set some of these up where you can set up a new source name that says this source name is for the manufacturing, the shop floor folks to go out and look for their items, and it's going to focus on items, jobs, and purchase orders, or something that you want to filter it down, or maybe projects in a couple of places, but it's not going to look everywhere else. So it's going to keep them focused on what's appropriate for them. And you can do that by selecting either an IDO that's in here. And again, that's more technical, but that's a data set that's part of SyteLine. You can also pick the columns that you want to search in here. And part of that IDO, it can be some of the standard ones that come with the system, but if you've also built some custom applications, so again, you are someone that wears multiple beanie hats, and you want to be able to say, I've built my own integration to these other tables that include some views of this information, and this is the data that I want to search on. Well, you can tell this search to look in those places as well, and only look at these columns in those views or tables. So you can configure this to whatever is appropriate. So you're not searching everywhere. You're keeping people focused on where it should. And again, this is something I look at as something that's more appropriate, at least at this, for an IT person to be managing, but it's good to know that it exists out there. Okay. With that, I'm going to close it all because I keep opening all this stuff up and I get lost in which one I have open. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say, all right, well, let's start looking at the grid. So we've got a couple more things to cover
Hey, Paul,
here.
would you mind if I derail you for a quick second here?
Sure.
And go back to the data search itself?
Yep.
And on the sources there, on that drop down, like Paul said, there's standard ones that come out there. And then you can kind of use your own if you had a custom one, custom tables. but maybe you're in production or a certain role, you actually can create a data source that is a combination of like job orders, operations, and items. And you could, call that like production, so that you can actually take some of these pre-built ones and make little groups of them as well. Because otherwise, I mean, who wants to go through the general ledger searching for plates? I don't care what's in there, right? But, my job, there are, 4 or 5 things I want to do. So you can create your custom source that just has those and go right to them.
Very good. Perfect. All right. So on here, so next up is looking at things in the grid. So we've been kind of dancing around the grid as we've been going through this. So I'm going to filter in place. Just give me whatever you have for items in this case. You can do all sorts of changes to this screen. So you can drag this over. So I found when I first started, I needed to keep moving this over. What is the data that's over here? Well, what's really nice is you can move these columns to where it's appropriate. I think quantity on hand was way, way, way over to the right, and I couldn't even see what it was. So I moved some of the columns around that made sense to me. So the 3 that I find when I'm looking at items, at least for the moment, are the item, the description, and the quantity on hand. There's probably a couple of others that are very important to me, and there are others that may be important to you. You can pick and choose which ones they are. You can drag them to the right configuration. And if you do make changes when you jump out of the window, you probably get that prompt that says, hey, you made changes to the grid. You want to save these? And if it's what you want to do the next time, absolutely hit yes, because the next time you come in here, you're going to get the grid that you set up and configured. Otherwise, it's going to go back to something that might be a little sillier. There's also the option in here to change the view to be all grid or all form. So in here, you can go ahead and there's an option to do it by hand, but there's I think the web client is Control-Shift-2, Control-Shift-1 to switch between the two. And if you just cycle through Control-Shift-1, it switches it, and then Control-Shift-1 switches it back to split screen. But you can go ahead and split this and it moves it right back and forth. And same thing with the grid. So if I wanted to change that view to just have the grid, you can have just the grid up here. And for those of you that didn't know, you can search for things in the grid. So you can go to any of the fields in here, and I want to look at things that are greater than this quantity on hand. You have to be in filter in place, turn it on, and it'll let you filter in any of these. It'll let you override and type in here where it's appropriate. Obviously not quantity on hand, but I can change the description from the grid in a bunch of different rows and then hit save. And I can do that from a grid. So if those of you that are very comfortable in playing with Excel, that's a great way to do that. If I come over and I'm gonna split my screen back again to the 2 forms, and I'm gonna say, let's look at, let's do MV again. Wildcard. We get our list, and there's probably about 20 or so that are in here. So I've got that. If you are very comfortable in Excel, well, you do have access to push this out to Excel. So I will tell you, as a former IT person, I used to get people that would ask me to give them a report of this, a report of that. I need a list of orders that were shipped on this date or done on that date. Well, with Export to Excel, I have a very basic report writing tool. So I can take whatever I've filtered on, whatever columns I've set up, and export that out to Excel. Let's put it on here, and I'll probably have to drag that out in here. Oh, I have that on. See that. So we've got this that pops up. It's the same 20 that are in here. That first row is giving me all the titles. So you can make changes in here, and you can also delete anything from here and replace them. So let me go ahead and do an import. I'm going to delete those. I'm going to change this to, I don't know, what are we at? 300. Let's go 400. And let's go 500 here, just so we have something. I'm going to change the description to it's new, it's item, and I'm going to spell it wrong on purpose. Oops. So usually I spell it wrong, not on purpose. This time I'm actually spelling it wrong on purpose. And then new. And so we've got them spelled wrong. I'm going to go ahead and highlight these two rows, copy them. I'm going to come back to CSI and say, I want to bring that data in. So I want to paste those rows, and there's two options in here, append, or there's an override. So the override is I'm going to replace two rows that match whatever key information I have in here. So maybe I sent these 20 records out and I wanted to change, I don't know, the planner for a bunch of them, and I want to overwrite that. It'll paste those in and write them. In this case, I'm going to append. That means it's going to add them. So it asks me, well, what do you want to append? Paste that. It looks all kind of garbly-gook. We'll let it sit there and do its thing for a moment. You'll see them pop up in the screen. But it added them to the system at this time. I can hit save. So it's added both of those in here. So we're going to get two new records. So we just had the 100, 200, and 300. Now we have the 4 and the 5. And this leads us to the next step. So we found a way to pull data out of the system. We found a way to put new data into the system using the grid. We can also go through and find ways to replace values in the collection. So if we want to go ahead and do that replacement, so I spelt some of these incorrectly. So I'm going to say new, T-I-E-M. So again, I'm going to spell it correct. I'm going to fix the spelling here. We'll call it item. And if I had put a 1 and a 2 after these, just replace the parts that I say. And it's not the planner code, it is the description. So just want to make sure I get caught in the right place. I'm going to tell it to replace those. And it says it was, oh, you know what I did wrong? I knew it. So Tim, it caught me in the same thing you had mentioned the other day. So one of the things that CSI does, anytime you make any changes, if you want to send data out to Excel, you want to make changes in here, it's only going to do it from wherever you are focused. I was focused on line 3, so it looks at line 3 and lower. In this case, I should have been at line 4 line 2 and doing it, or selected all of them. So it caught me in exactly a good point to show you another tip or trick. Make sure you're focused on the right line before you make changes, or you're sending data to Excel. So if I had my focus down here and sent it off to Excel, it may not send all the records. It's just going to send the ones that are below that. Or if I do that replace, it's going to come up with that.
And one thing was a good point here on this, Paul, in terms of the paste Rosa Pen, that's basically just adding new records. On the paste rows overwrite, it isn't going out and matching like the item. So in column 1, I've got that part number. It's not going out there finding that and updating that record. It's simply just going row 1, I'm going to update row 1. Row 2, I'm going to update row 2. And in Paul's case, he was focused on row 3. So his thing was Excel row 1 is going to update SyteLine row 3. So it doesn't have any knowledge of the actual part or the record and the key, the custom order number, the item number. So this is a really good tool if you're, going to do something right there, and you know what you want to do, and you could do that search and replace in the system for say changing everything to a different planner code. But if you wanted to go out and I'm going to make this planner code, do a bunch of stuff, and then re-upload it, that's good. But if you were to export that and then go away, kill your session, come back, now I've got the spreadsheet, that collection may not be exactly lined up. So it's not something that you can go work on and then come back with guaranteed results. In fact, low percentage that's going to work out. You've kind of got to sit there with that collection that you've just exported, not touch it, and then reload it in order to get that to really confidently line up.
Yeah, good points. Very good. I'm sure somebody will trip over that if they didn't hear that correctly. That's good. All right. So let's see. We've covered a couple of these. And by the way, we were talking about in the query, it made that little statement down below. It's basically building the where clause in a SQL statement. So if you want to know what some of the values are in the actual tables that you have to use in the parameters that we started with in Explorer, well, they're going to show you what they are in here. So if you select them out of the property and you select the value in here, they're also going to show you what the possible outcomes could be. In this case, I was looking at the status, and it's ordered. So it's looking for stat with a capital S and everything else lowercase, and the O is what it was looking for. So in the database, it doesn't put ordered, it just puts the letter O. So just be aware that if you're filtering on some things, it's nice using the UI because it puts human words in there, but sometimes if you're looking for things that are very technical, you need to know the technical, what the database has, because that's what it's really searching on. All right, so we got that. I mentioned in here, we added these through a very quick way to do it. It was in the user preferences, the runtime layout. It was in the icon toolbar. It is very similar in the web, but you have to go to the designer tool. So again, multiple beanie hat to do that. It's not something I would expect every user to do, but if you want to do it and you need some help, give us a call. We'll give you that hand, help you out on there. We were talking about the grid. We changed the display. We did some editing in here. We exported. We switched a couple of things. Did the find and replace. How many records? Oh, that's a good question. So by default, and just looking at the clock, I'm going to move along quick. Just looking at the clock here, how many records? You usually get 200 of them. But inside of CSI, and I'm just going to jump back over to the items, inside of here, you can change some of those under user preferences, under behavior in there. There's a record cap, and then there's a list record cap. So a data record cap and a list record cap, and you can change those to a different number. You can retrieve them all. I caution you, if you've got 50,000 parts and everybody starts retrieving them all, it's going to be a little heavier on the database than everybody wants. But if you are typically working with larger data sets, you can override these. There is a security setting that IT can set to limit you beyond that. But this is the difference between the record data cap and the list data cap. Record data cap is what shows up in the grid. The list is what shows up in a dropdown. So if you do some dropdowns, how many records does it pull up? So it's only going to pull up the first 200 or whatever value you've set in here. Okay.
Lest the IT people kill us, there is a way for system admin to max out record caps, because I mean we've had customers that everyone is like, oh great, I can retrieve all, and everyone sets to retrieve all, and they're calling with performance issues. And first of all, the fact that now you can filter and grab the data set, I would never work with 20,000 items. I couldn't, right? I'm only concerned with, the items that, the small group of this planner code or things like that. So yes, you can do it. Also, there's a parameter in process defaults, which is in this slide deck. Just look up that form, and that'll do a system-wide, even though I say, give me 1,000 records, I could cap the entire system to 500 records or 200 or whatever.
Yep, good point. So let's see, we got a couple points left, or a couple of tips and tricks. One of them is right on this screen. This is the intercompany communication. So you've probably heard us talk about this before. It's been called Mingle. It's a social collaboration. But in here, in any of the forms inside of CSI, if I'm on the web version of it, at least, I can start sharing some of this information. So if I'm on a customer order and they've asked for a credit limit increase, well, I can send it off to accounting and say, they've asked it to be up to for $1 million. Is that okay? And they're going to say no. They're good with $100,000. But you can have that conversation, or it's just for this one order, or whatever that discussion is. The goal of this is really to have those conversations recorded that don't have a specific home inside of an ERP, but they're around documents that are in the ERP. So what are we doing with this part? Is Rev A okay? Can we use Rev B? Customer said it was B, but Rev A was what we ordered. So you can carry that on, because chances are somebody's going to come back a couple months later and say, hey, what happened to this? And if it was water cooler conversations, you have no records of it. If it was conversations that happened in an email, again, you have to find who sent that email and where it came from. If it's in here, now we have records of all that. Plus, whoever's in that conversation can click on the details of it and open up the source record of that item or that sales order or whatever it is that they're discussing. So a couple of other things that I want to just touch on there really quick. Customer and purchase order life cycles. So I've got an order called up here. There's a button in here that and it's not just in customer order entry, but this gives the full life cycle of a sales order. And it started out as an estimate. We could have created multiple sales orders from it. We see that there's just one job, could be multiple jobs on here. We could have had multiple shipments, multiple invoices. The good news is there's no returns. The bad news is they haven't paid us yet. So you get all of this from one spot. And you have the same sort of thing on the purchasing side where you can go from a purchase requisition, purchase order, receipt, voucher, and payment as well. So all of those are trackable as well as you are just one click away. So if I wanted to look at this invoice, so provided I have the, I'm sorry, I have to right click and then hit look details. Provided I have the security to get in here, it's going to open up the invoice for me. And you'll notice I have the same button in here and it's going to go to the same screen. So if you are on the AP side and you've got a bunch of POs that you're trying to match to vouchers that are coming in and you have to do some forensics looking through, well, what happened? The numbers are different. Who changed the purchase order? Was the receipt wrong? What was it? You have one place that you can go that looks at all those records in one place. So it's a great tool for, really anyone on the sales or the purchasing side of things. Then there is one other area that I wanted to just touch on, and I'm just going to filter, clear that up and do a new order. Let's see, give me a new order. And now in this case, this is something to do with sequence numbers. So this is our last tip and trick of the day where I know we're a minute or two over. Maybe I have X, Y, Z, or Z, again, I can't spell. And I want to put in something like a question mark in here. And I've got to enter some information. I got to pick a customer. And we'll hit save. And what will happen here is it'll go out and it will get the next customer or the next number that follows that XYZ. So this is important for anywhere where auto numbering takes place. You can come up with your own prefixes on the fly, and you don't have to keep a little book next to yourself to keep track of what was the last number. So if it was, 3 weeks later, and I don't know what the next one is, but XYZ is what I call all my special orders that are going overseas or whatever it is. And I want to keep track of those and label them differently in the order ID. But I don't remember what the last one was. I'm just going to put XYZ question mark and hit save, and it's going to pick the next number. So there's a tool that sits behind the scenes in here. It'll be in our slide deck, but there's a synchronized tool that keeps track of what are those numbers. So if you wanted to go update it or change those, you can go ahead and do that. But it's a great way to keep different numbering sequences for different reasons, and really up to you on how you want to roll those out. All right. So we covered navigation.
Hey, Paul, before we do that, just a couple of quick questions came in, and I'm backing up a little bit, but that whole search and replace thing, there was a little checkbox, say all values, and basically that is, let's say I wanted to replace value, planner code SG with planner code TR or something, but maybe I want to just take the entire list, no matter what the planner code is. I want it all to go to TR. You click all values, and it's just going to, no matter what's in there now, it's going to change everything. The second question was on the filters that we're doing. Can I put in ascending or descending? That's a good question. I've never tried that. I'm going to try. I'm going to do a little beanie cap thing myself. I'm going to try that. I know you can do it on the form pretty easily, but let me try that, and I will get back to you. Question.
Yeah, there could be another, especially I know inside of the help file for Explorer, where I was looking at the objects, it did have a few other parameters that you could pass. I just showed the ones that were obvious. But I thought there were a few other ones that you could pass as well. So there may be a sort of an ascending or descending. That's a great one. Yeah, if you always want to look at the latest order instead of the oldest, that's great. Good. Any other questions?
That was it.
Okay. So we did cover navigation. How do you find information? We did some things with the grid. We talked about the communications up here, and we just barely touched on life cycles and sequence, even though I do think both of those are very valuable options in here. If there's no other questions, we want to thank you for attending today. If you found value, let us know. If you didn't, let us know that too. We'll work on it. If you have some of your own tips or tricks, please send those in. We want to share those and get everybody up to speed on the best ways and to use the software.
And if there's any, topics that you'd want for sessions or anything that you think would be a good idea, shoot that to us as well. And we'll see if we can put that together.
Oh, looks like one question came in.
Actually, it was more of a statement. Great
I
presentation.
think it is. Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Denise. Appreciate it. We appreciate everyone joining today. And with that, I think we'll just wrap it up.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you both for the wonderful presentation. Lots of great information here. And like they stated, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in that text file that Tim was mentioning earlier as well, please shoot an email over to info@aitbusiness.com, and I'll make sure that Tim shares that with me so that I can get it back to you right away. And with that, thanks everyone for your time. I hope you have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.